Good morning, all, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at. It's morning with me. Uh, I'm DBJ. I may have a guest on with me. There might be some technical difficulties or whatnot. But today on Monster Monday, we are going to talk about mimics. Everything and anything related to mimics, we're going to take them seriously, even though they're quite ridiculous in many ways. And we're just going to deep dive into them, how to use them, some really great stories that we can create when using them, um, some rather ridiculous interactions that we can have with them, and that sort of thing. Now, one of the things that I tend to think about when using mimics, or the idea of using mimics as well as many other creatures, I've kind of lumped the mimic in with a group of creatures I call Gygax-ian creatures. Um, yeah. Oh, no problem. RP Gamer is going to join me as well. I'm doing this on my own. It's cool, but having friends join in is much better. There he goes. Let me turn this off. Boom. Sweet. All right. So one of the things we need to get out of the way is, what is a mimic in the first place? Most of you guys probably already know, but we have to establish a baseline, and I think that it's best if we all stay on the same page. So mimics are like mimics are a shape-changing creature, and that creature tends to take on the image of a treasure chest in a dungeon, right? So the player characters go down into the dungeon and they're looking around for something, and they end up finding a weird or bizarre treasure chest. And so they come across the treasure chest. The thief, or whoever, the thief at the time, Rogue goes over to open it up, and then lo and behold, the treasure chest, the top lifts up, and lo and behold, it produces teeth, and the thing chomps down on whoever tries to take the chest. Now, there are a ton of Gygax-ian creatures. The gelatinous cube that happens to be 10-foot square, running down the hallways that the player characters run into by accident. I believe there's a creature called the earworm that you would obtain if you stopped and listened at doors, because there was an ability to listen at doors, and it was on a D6. So if you're an OSR person, you'd understand what I'm talking about. But you would listen at a door, and the thing would come at you. There's a ton of other ones. I believe there's a golem created from the treasure and magic items in the group, or in the location. And as you hack away at the golem, you start losing the magic items that you could actually uncover in the loot. And there's some other ones that are just like, wait a minute, there's no reason for this thing to even exist. Like, it doesn't even make any sense. So let's pause just a slight bit. I'm DBJ, and I have with me RP Gamer, who also has a YouTube channel as well. So please go over and subscribe. But RP Gamer, please introduce yourself so we can get to talking about this really strange and bizarre and silly creature.
Hi guys, I'm RP Gamer, and as DBJ just said, I have a channel where I pretty much do what DBJ does and chat for about anything and everything to do with RPGs. So come over and subscribe and like. And
cool. Yeah, we're just I think a part of me just finds the idea of the mimic to be a little bit ridiculous, but despite at least the way it's portrayed, but despite that, it exists in the game. So we're just going to have some fun talking about what it is and where it is. And really, this started from our last talk when we were talking about we were in the jungles and we got to talking about the old poor jaguar just trying to live in the jungle. Yeah. And the idea of the mimic came up some kind of way, because usually that's how it is. We start randomly talking about something, and so we'll try to stay on target and not let the jaguar distract us. But yeah, that was a Thursday, third pillar.
That won't happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So, mimic. So what do we have? Have something here. Oh, okay. So let's get the boring stuff out the way. Let me read a little bit off about the mimic. Mimic is a shape changer. The mimic can use its action to polymorph into an object or back into its true amorphous form, which I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. Its statistics are the same in each form. Any equipment it is wearing or carrying isn't transformed. It reverts to its true form if it dies. Adhesive. The mimic adheres to anything that touches it. A huge or smaller creature adhered to the mimic is also grappled by it. DC 13. Ability checks made to escape this grapple have disadvantage. False appearance. While the mimic remains motionless, it is indistinguishable from an ordinary object. And lastly, grappler. The mimic has advantage on attack rolls against any creature grappled by it. And it has 2 abilities. It has a pseudopod. It's a melee weapon attack. Does it's +5 to hit, reach out 5 feet, does 1d8 plus 3 damage, bludgeoning damage. If mimic is an object form, the target is subject to its adhesive trait. So it'll throw out an adhesive pseudopod and try to have someone stick to it. And of course, it's got a bite, which does 1d8 plus 3 piercing damage and an extra 1d8 acid damage, probably trying to digest whatever it is that goes after it. Now, yes, there are ecology books out there, but we're gonna have some fun with this. So, okay, the one ridiculous thing that comes to mind, and then I'll pass it off to RP, is that the mimic looks like a treasure chest down in a dungeon, and it's like, okay, if this thing like right here, let's see, what is this intelligence? An intelligence of 5, so it's got an animal intelligence to it. So why in the world would it become a treasure chest unless there's enough food for it to decide to become one, right? Which is, does it only eat like once a month? Does an abandoned dungeon actually receive visitors once a month? Or maybe are they wandering monsters? The minute someone realizes what it is, it's going to have to move. And part of it is just like, I don't really understand. So we're going to have to take this at face value. So there must be a reason why it becomes a treasure chest. So I'm thinking that enough people have traveled into dungeons for the mimic to realize that enough treasure chests are open for it to think that, hey, if I become one, I could have a little bit of a meal every once in a while. Which kind of means that those abandoned dungeons might not be as abandoned as people think they are. Or it doesn't need to eat as much as it does. What do you say, RP?
I've never understood why they're just treasure chests. I mean, for one thing, mimics would exist elsewhere in the world. They aren't just born in dungeons, so they've obviously took on different shapes throughout history and depending where they are. Because, I mean, in the middle of a forest, the chest would look completely out of place. So they obviously start as something else and go by whatever's whatever would fit into where they are and whatever's attractive to its prey.
Yep. No, it's not. Yeah, I hear you on that. The Prue says it's high noon where she's at, and Jared says, mimic door, mimic tables, and the worst, mimic pants. You know what? Mimic pants.
I'd already, haven't we?
Yeah. You know what? I'm thinking like you that mimics. It's probably rare that mimics are down in dungeons, but that's probably the one that gets the most attention. I'm thinking mimics probably have spread throughout the world in so many other places, and that, like you said, the rare mimic ends up finding its way down, maybe because of the weather, or it's attached to someone's back or something like that. It then finds its way down into a dungeon and then realizes, hey, this is a great place to stay. I'm surprised the mimic is still kind of considered a treasure chest, like you said, where it could really be, because it says it's an inanimate object, and I'm surprised it's not more like stones or tree stumps or wagon wheels or something like that. Something that is maybe a little more mobile, or something that's very, very easy to hide, like another giant boulder or something. I'm very surprised by that. I would absolutely use mimics as both like natural environment, and then like in a city, especially like a really nasty city, like with dark alleys and like, the lower people living in lower economic regions where, there's a lot of like theft, and they're living in the bottoms, and the piss and urine. The DBJ twin braining me again. Sorry, I'm not exactly sure what that means. But I can imagine it being like Jared said, like a door or a table, a wagon wheel, a backpack, maybe a chandelier, or a chair or something of that nature, where there's something is going on a murderous rampage, and people are disappearing, and maybe they're blaming it on like a mobile monster, like a tiger or like an owlbear or something. But in the community, they don't realize that the mimic has been doing this the whole time and moving from house to house. I could see that.
It could also alter its appearance as well as it's going through the city because maybe people in the lower districts don't really have doors as the upper city does, so it alters its appearance depending where it is in the city and what it's going after. I find it interesting where it decided that humanoid creatures were its prey, because humanoid creatures haven't been around forever. So I'm assuming it goes after anything that comes near. It's just a plain old carnivore that goes after any kind of meat.
That's true too, because we're assuming that the mimic is it's a creature that only likes to eat basically humanoid adventurers, and that's not always the case. So maybe it's surviving on like field mice and rats and rabbits out in the wild, maybe larger animals, snakes and weasels and badgers and things like that stumble across it. And then the rare few that find civilization, maybe it then began getting a taste for it. I'm not sure exactly how it would cover its tracks. I mean, it has the ability to alter its shape, which is safe enough for itself. But I can imagine that there would be places where there's lots of blood and bones and such, and all you see is like the kitchen table and chairs, and where the chair's in the corner, but you just see this big bloody spot, and then like you see the blood splatter, and then there's this like round location where there's no blood, as if somebody like placed something there, and and everyone's looking around like, oh no, Joe died and Julie died last week, and there's this strange round void in the middle of the bones and body parts that were left there, but no one knows why. Which is
all it takes is one person or one adventuring party to come in and have the knowledge of a mimic and say it could be this, for it to like be. It still wouldn't be found out because there's so much in the city for it to be, but people would start looking at the inanimate objects a bit more closely, or being a bit more wary of them.
Yeah. Prue says the mimic ought to fit into its chosen habitat, and nature just makes more sense for that. And then Jared responds with, mimics have enough intelligence to replace an object they know their prey will be involved in. In 5e, they nerfed the intelligence of the mimic, but originally it was 10 intelligence, same as the standard human. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. There are lots of animals in nature that are really intelligent. Things like, those are hive creatures. I was about to say ants. Ants are hive creatures, but we do have like badgers that make dams. We have raccoons. There are crows are very intelligent. Is it crows or ravens?
I believe crows. I read somewhere you can actually teach a crow to speak better than a parrot.
Yep. So. Elephants. So I'm presuming its animal intelligence is really just a way that it has an intelligence enough to track its prey and to become something to attack, that it's smart enough to do that. It knows that if it isn't shaped like something, say adventurers or the public finds disturbing, like a blob, then it knows it's going to be attacked. So I'm sure after an attack, it may immediately revert back to its normal form if it can, after it's finished digesting something. So I wouldn't say it's a negative so much, but yeah, they did kind of nerf the intelligence, because I can imagine the mimic is kind of a step down from the doppelganger.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the doppelganger stats there, and they do have intelligence to that of a human, or at least a player character. So it would make sense for them to nerf the mimic so that people don't have a reason to use the doppelganger.
Yeah. Jared says the same thing I've always thought, that he says there's other creatures similar to the mimic, cloaker, piercer, roper, wolf in sheep's clothing. That's the creature with the little rabbit on top. Wolf in sheep's clothing. Gas spore, doppelganger. There could be a strange covenant of shapeshifters. I thought the same thing, that maybe doppelgangers could use mimics as like kind of a pet, a doppelganger living in a family's home after they've killed them, and then a mimic, door or table or chair also lives there as like something that defends the home and whatnot. That would be kind of nasty and bizarre. The doppelganger walking through the city with a mimic, top hat or a cane or something. I don't know. Okay, all right. Let's assume the mimic probably has to have the same size and weight. So maybe a wheelbarrow, a doppelganger, homeless person in a wheelbarrow, maybe, or a worker, and then could just kind of blend in with people.
I mean, homeless people and that are the most ignored in society, really. You don't really look twice at a homeless person, do you? So it would make sense for them to hide as homeless people.
And the mimic must have some sort of ability to see what people interact with and then obtain that form. So becoming pieces of like furniture, like a chair or a door, if they see enough people moving it, they probably will like flow from one object to another, so that they don't, if they change it to a door and kill someone, they may take the opportunity to become something else, like a barrel of ale, or not like an empty barrel, or a barrel filled with an unknown quantity. And then maybe if the barrel gets moved, maybe it then becomes something else, like a sack of coins or what have you, moving on to bigger and better prey, and might have maybe a list of objects it can change into. Like, hey, a door works, a barrel works, a chair. It may have a like a queue of 5 or 6 objects that it could change into in a big city.
Yeah, I imagine with its now low intelligence, it will only have like a limited amount of things that it can remember at one time of how to turn into and how to behave like. I mean, I know they're inanimate objects, but still have, like, a chest opens its lid, or a chair doesn't open its top, kind of thing. They need to know that. They need to know where to hide the mouth and where to.
So I wonder if it's possible for it to become something, but it doesn't know what the inside is made of. So if it turns into a chest and has never seen a chest, maybe it's seen a chest open and close, but it doesn't know what's on the inside of it. So if you open the lid of a chest that is a mimic, that you just see like the mimic's internal organs and teeth. Like, if it doesn't immediately attack, all you're really doing is lifting the lid, which is basically its mouth, and then you just see its mouth and tongue or whatever it creates. Whereas, like, maybe if it becomes a backpack and the adventurers go to buy equipment and it becomes a backpack, that if someone decides to open the backpack, that it's the same thing again. It's just teeth and organs and like thick ooze, adhesive ooze down inside of the middle of it when they go to reach for their 50-foot rope when they hit that first pit trap.
Yeah, they won't be opening that again.
Yeah. That would be.
You raised an interesting point of, like, how does the mimic learn these items? Does it learn to change from sight, or does it need to, like, touch it, or even basically eat it?
Destroy the object, and then take over its form, kind of like a doppelganger.
Because, like, destroying it would see what it's made of, what it's like, the weight of it, kind of thing.
Now there is a creature. Wow, Jared probably knows this one. There's a creature that looks like the floor or a rug, and it just lays there. One was in the one was. No. Maybe that's the cloaker that was in the ceiling. One looked like the floor or a rug, like it could smother you, and then another one was like a blanket or lived in the ceiling. Because at first I was thinking, like, for a mimic to observe humanity bothering an object, it has to be another object already, and probably be rug of smothering. Oh, it was a cursed magic. No, it was a cursed magic item. It was like, oh man, my mind is just, I would need too many books to look this up stuff. Yeah, well, there was a rug of smothering. And for some reason, I remember something dropping from the ceiling that was not a piercer. But see, piercers and ropers, they make a lot of sense to me. Because you could have a flock, I guess a flock of piercers in a cave to drop down on things and pierce through them, and then slowly eat them and then climb back up to where it normally lives. And then ropers I think they've given them quite a bit of intelligence. They have got like tendrils and mouths, and they can like grab creatures and pull them in. They make a lot of sense too to me, especially if you have an underground ecology. But for the mimic doesn't have a normal or a natural ecology. It can become nearly anything. So I'm presuming, like the doppelganger, that the mimic somehow may have been spawned from something else, and it's like one of those creatures in nature that like kicks the egg out of the nest and becomes the other egg, and may have grown and been distributed that way. Where
Yeah,
it, yeah.
makes sense. I've I've always because I've always thought that mimics, cloakers, piercers, and doppelgangers. I don't come from D&D background, so I've never played with them as separate things. I've always treated them as like they're all basically mimics, so they're all basically the one creature. They've just I see it as different cultures have seen them differently because they've seen them as that object more often, so they call them different.
um, right, because like Jared points out, there's also construct creatures that may be designed around camouflage in certain environments. It says, but there's also living items such as intelligent items. So being very stereotypical, maybe in Japanese culture, it could become a suit of armor. What is it? I cannot remember the name of the entire suit of armor with the silk threads and plates of lacquered wood. But it could become maybe a katana, maybe something bigger, maybe the large polearm, the naginata or something. If a mimic, now if a mimic is really heavy, in like the 100-pound, 150-pound size, it would have to be something far more, like it couldn't be a weapon maybe, but maybe like a wagon or the wheel of a wagon, or something of that nature. And like you said, in one culture, they may not even call it a mimic. It might be known as something else. And maybe it becomes more of a natural item, such as like a stone or a section of wall or bricks or marble. But in another culture, it's possible that that it becomes something that they interact with far more. So, for example, like a sailing culture, maybe the mimic likes to go on board ships in one culture because they're like an island nation. And then yet in another culture, if they maybe live between floating islands or something, it could become the saddle of a griffin because they mount flying animals or something. I'm trying to just pull things out my ass right now.
Well, I was just thinking about the intelligent items. Maybe they could be mimics that have lost their ability to change, to revert back to what they were or change. They've somehow lost that ability, so they're stuck as that one item.
uh, Jared says, imagine the living furniture from Beauty and the Beast, but evil.
It's pretty evil, isn't it?
Well, okay. We're assuming a mimic is a singular creature, never that it's only a singular creature. But who is to say that another evil creature wouldn't have it as a pet or an ally or live in a symbiotic relationship with it? So, there could be the beast that lives in a big castle that has these pieces of furniture that walk around and follow it around or do what it says because it knows that, this trollish beast, gathers food items for it randomly. Or maybe the the local townsfolk that always are, in a mob with their pitchforks and torches, try to come and kill the beast. And so the furniture comes and attacks everyone once a month or so. and the furniture comes alive and goes back to its, the candelabra and the piano goes back into one corner, and the stove and the fake fire in the fireplace and the logs go back to where it is. I don't know. I don't think a mimic can make a fake flame on top of its head, but that would be kind of cool.
I don't know. I don't know why it wouldn't be able to. Might learn to mimic the light of it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't actually have to be a proper flame. Would just have to be kind of an illusion, basically.
And see, Prue makes a point that we kind of hit upon. Wouldn't that mimic have to remove the original object for that to work well? I love the idea, but wouldn't it look suspicious if there's all of a sudden two magic swords where you put one? So can the mimic destroy an inanimate object the same way it destroys living things? Like, because it says it has an acid bite, right? So is that like a digestive juice? So if it sees something, maybe if it could become a sword or a backpack or something, can it start to chomp down on it and consume it, kind of wrap its body around it and then start consuming it, and then changing into its form?
No, there is something, because Prue's right. It's going to have to get rid of that other object because you're going to have to pick it up.
Yeah, or is it intelligent enough to become yet another a group of objects that a mimic can randomly become? So like a stack of barrels, when another barrel just appears next to it, no one really thinks about it. Or another horse saddle happens to be in the stables and no one thinks about it, even though that, at the other end of the stables, there was a horse that was killed and everyone's trying to figure out what did it. No one broke in, but the horse's body has been chomped into. But yet, someone comes along and still has to, maybe a scout has to use another horse. So the scout's original horse is dead, grabs the saddle, puts it on another horse, goes riding off into the distance, and then the scout's never seen again. That's a possibility where it may see a number of items and become one of those number of items. I don't know. It could be smart enough to get rid of the old items. So if there's, if a family comes home, they've got 4 chairs around their kitchen table, and then all of a sudden they've got a 5th one. That might seem kind of odd. But maybe it just has an animal like, oh, there's 3 of those, I'll become a 4th one.
But that to me would take a bit more intelligence to kind of watch. They'd have to watch the scene beforehand to know what is numerous and what is meant to be there and not meant to be there, so it can fit in. So I don't know if something with a basic animal intelligence would kind of figure out that there's 4 family members, so there can only be 4 chairs, kind of thing.
Which, if it was a perfect predator, no one would ever find it. So maybe these are like these are the situations where the mimic reveals itself without quite revealing itself. A 5th chair, another wagon wheel when a worker says, oh, we ran out of wagon wheels to replace the broken ones, and then they find a new one. Or a door that suddenly doesn't squeak anymore, or something like that. Maybe a door has been known to not really lock very well, and it's squeaky, it's got rusty hinges and whatnot, but then when they come home, the door opens and closes perfectly and doesn't make a sound, even though it looks the same. It may not have this, it may not mimic the exact characteristics of it in terms of smell or sound or even touch or something. So maybe the few mimics that are like it, its animal intelligence isn't able to predict the future or observe the past or analyze how it's supposed to interact socially. And so maybe that gives one or more mimics away, and people are a little perturbed by it, or maybe even like they may not even know it's a mimic. They're just like, fey creatures, you know, blame it on them.
I mean, to be honest, quite a lot of people might not. They'd question like an extra chair in the corner, but they wouldn't think too much of it. They'd put it down to, oh, they've just brought another chair in, or they wouldn't investigate completely. They wouldn't go over and examine the chair and all that. They'd just see it as a normal chair that someone must have brought in. Because we try and stay logical with our thinking. We don't. I mean, in a magical world with monsters, maybe you'd be, if you had previous knowledge of mimics and that, you might question an extra item or something like that. But if you didn't have previous knowledge of a mimic, then you wouldn't think anything of it, really.
Now, Jared brings up another point about mimics, about their size. Like he says, I mean, there's an adventure path where a ghost ship floats into town. No one is on board, but when people board it, they don't return. The entire ship is actually a colossal mimic. He also says, I imagine if you could persuade a mimic to some degree, you could bargain for it to serve you as a transformative object, perhaps for food or something else it finds valuable. And that's what I was thinking. Like, like druids are known for being the elemental and natural, the animal speakers of the world, right? They're able to befriend small animals or wherever they live. So if they live in a desert, you know, they can befriend like scorpions and rattlesnake or sidewinder snakes or something like that, maybe trapdoor spiders and whatnot. But a mimic doesn't have a natural habitat, maybe. So maybe there's a group out there of some sort that's able to commune with mimics, like those in the doppelganger family, and keep them as like pets or allies. I mean, it could be something natural, like a doppelganger. Of course, it doesn't say so in the rules, but maybe shape changers have a natural affinity towards each other. So the doppelganger knows what a mimic is, or at least suspects it when it comes across it. And maybe the mimics understand the other way around, like it wouldn't attack a doppelganger because they're like a kindred spirit of sorts.
I would say that shapeshifter in the shapeshift family would probably know on sight what is a fellow shapeshifter, even if it is in its inanimate form. They would know, because the mimic would have to know. Otherwise, you'd have mimics sat next to mimics. The whole dining set could be a bunch of mimics for all they know. So they'd have to know where a mimic is in relation to them. If this is like another mimic's territory or doppelgangers in this town.
Yeah, maybe. Wow. Maybe doppelgangers could help move. A doppelganger could help move mimics around, either because the doppelganger. And now this could be a natural event where doppelgangers and mimics work together. Or it could be like the doppelganger's on a mission and knows that maybe there's a kindred spirit kind of thing. So a doppelganger knows that there's a mimic. The mimic becomes a wheelbarrow. The wheelbarrow is moved to another city, and then the doppelganger just leaves it in another village or town or city because they know that they work together, right? Like I can't imagine a doppelganger taking violent action against a mimic to kill it. I imagine that it would either leave it alone, if they're just neutral towards each other, or work together, or remove it from, say, a crime scene. So that, a family is attacked, there's 5 chairs, the doppelganger becomes like a city guard, removes one of the chairs, and then takes the chair and maybe puts it in like a castle or something like that to ensure that the mimic is never found, which would be pretty bad in and of itself too.
I just think about that because I'm thinking about mimics and what do they do when they don't have doppelgangers to assist? But how do they get around? They must have some kind of animate form to go into to get around in without too much suspicion.
Well, they say has an amorphous shape. So is it like an amoeba of some sort? Is it just a blob, like a grayish brown ooze that just moves from place to place and then becomes an object? Or can it move, like, could it become a chair and just walk on its chair legs to get to where it needs to move to? I'm assuming that that in part it could not be the solid object, and just like maybe, like if it's a treasure chest, the bottom of it could like slide across the ground to like push it back into itself back into a corner. But for it to go long distances, I'm thinking it needs a ride on something. It would,
needs to become something it knows will get moved.
Yeah, because it specifically says inanimate objects. So we're going to have to remove like cats and dogs out of the equation. Maybe because, for example, maybe the doppelganger is far better at, well, no, the doppelganger is humanoid.
There's got that's the gray area. Like, can a mimic become like basic animals, and can a doppelganger go that low in intelligent wise?
Right.
You got that gray area that mixes them both.
Yeah, because there isn't a creature that just becomes other creatures. Or an animal that becomes other animals. But it's a possibility. Maybe they are the cause of like things like owlbears and griffins, or like chimera or something, like where they, it's a possibility they've tried to become these other things and got stuck, or it's like, get rid of all the doppelgangers and mimics, you stop the owlbear breeding or what have you. Maybe that's stretching it a little too far, but yeah, you made a comment about mimics being next to mimics being next to mimics. If they didn't know it, that would be kind of a bizarre situation where someone comes in to sit down to eat, and the chair and the table and the drapes and everything all become mimics, and then all the other mimics are looking at the other mimics like, wait, what? Hold on. Oh man. Now,
and then the house in itself, opens up.
Oh man, that's bizarre. So that would be interesting. Although I get why, Gygax would want them to be, a treasure chest, because really the greediest, character in the group is going to run over and want to get the magic items and the treasure and immediately open it up and not realize what it is. But
I mean, originally it was just about dungeon crawling and that, really, dungeon crawling. So the treasure chest made perfect sense.
Right. But there must be a way there's got to be other ways for us to use them in adventures without basically, giving a middle finger to the player characters, because really they can look like and become anything. And so if you just, if you have an adventure going on for 5 sessions and then you just say, oh, by the way, your backpack is a mimic, that would be kind of, that's kind of a, that's a bad move if you're a DM, just because you want to just surprise your player characters, because then someone's going to say, okay, when did my backpack become a mimic, and why didn't I know, and why wouldn't I realize it? And then you get into the whole argument of, well, you were asleep and the mimic consumed your backpack, or it did it at night, or I don't know. There's got to be a way to insert them in the game, make it a surprise.
Do smaller items like backpacks and swords and things like that is to go into the kind of life cycle of the mimic. Like maybe they found these items within a chest that itself is a mimic, but it just given birth, and it disguised its young as these items to get them out into the world.
Yeah. The Schwartz says, I seriously don't want to imagine a mimic backpack. I think that's just crossing a line. Yeah, there's a certain absurd aspect to Gygax-ian creatures, right? Because if you start to think about it, a mimic could really, they can really cause they can wreck shop. They can cause some damage. They can, unless someone sees it actually eating someone, a mimic can get away with murder for quite a long time.
Of course. Especially if it has help to get around and re-hide itself.
Prue says, I like using them in a murder mystery, like you hinted at in the beginning of the stream. I like the thought of a doppelganger thief working with a mimic as a watchdog. Might cost lives. Yeah, a Jack the Ripper type murderer running around the city that could become anyone. It could the doppelganger goes down an alley, kills someone, has the mimic as its like as a wheelbarrow or something. Someone hears the scream, runs around the corner, and then the mimic becomes like an innocent young girl screaming at the top of her lungs that sees the dead body, and then the mimic becomes like an old trash can or something in the corner, or a set of marble steps that just leads to nowhere, just stuck up against the wall, and the lady's like screaming like, oh my god, he's run that way. And the authorities are like blowing their whistles like, let's go.
Also, a mimic would be a perfect like kind of disposal unit for the bodies.
Yeah.
Well. Chuck them in the wheelbarrow, and then the mouth closes and it's gone.
Yeah. Jared points out one of the main aspects of Gygax-ian creatures, which is, he says the best thing about these mimic creatures is that it stops the players from being so casual and careless in a dungeon. Yes and no. I think it helps players to not be so casual in dungeons, but no, because like most things, if you overdo it, it becomes the other problem in the other direction, where the player characters like have analysis paralysis and then they never move. They just all, walking around with 10-foot poles, tapping the floor, tapping the ceiling, checking for traps every 3 minutes, never opening a treasure chest for like 45 minutes as everyone tries to figure out how to open it from 30 feet away. I mean, it can get a little bit out of hand with the we think everything is a mimic or Gygax-ian creature. We need to listen at the door. Okay, I'm going to stand 30 feet away, poke it with my 10-foot pole. That's why one of the like first and second edition, people used to go down into dungeons with chickens, because you'd open a door, throw the chicken in the room, and then see what happened. Mimic attacks the chicken, gets stuck. Chicken jumps on top of the treasure chest, can't get off of it because it adhered to it, and then consumes the chicken, and you're like, yeah, got it. Something like, hey, let's go down there with a goat. Goat walks through the room, falls through the 10-foot pit, that kind of thing.
Also, you have the thing of, if you have too many mimics, then you have the question of how are these mimics surviving when there's mimics on the outside eating everyone?
Yeah.
How?
Exactly. Tesla Ranger says interesting trick, poking something 30 feet away with a 10-foot pole. But adventurers are smart, because they take their 3 10-foot poles and lash them together with their extra rope, and then see, it's like a straw. You stick one end of the straw down the other straw. And it becomes like a pole vault, where it starts bending. The middle of it starts making an object, and it starts bending like like arcing through the air, and they're trying to tap the keyhole or something. I don't know. Adventurers are stupid sometimes, and they'll try to get away with anything. So yeah, touching something 30 feet away with a 10-foot pole is pretty ridiculous, unless the 10-foot pole's a mimic.
Yeah.
And helping the party out, and goes, hey, if you bring me down into the dungeon, I'd sure like to help you out as a 10-foot pole.
Oh God.
No, I don't know. It just
yeah, in that case, we might as well go that the rest of the party are mimics as well. That there's only the one PC, and the rest of the party are mimics.
Party of bunch of mimics and doppelgangers.
Yeah, everything in this adventure is a mimic, and they just don't know it.
Oh, that would just be, that's just wrong.
Yeah, well, that's where these chats go most of the time.
Oh my goodness. Oh, oh, and then you got to pull the other ones out. So maybe a few of them are wearing cloakers. One of them is dragging a rolled up rug of smothering down into the dungeon. Hey, it's a brand new dungeon. You got to populate it somehow. Bring down furniture. A mimic wheelbarrow full of piercers and ropers just moving in. Got to get a gelatinous cube to move in as well, just to round out everything so the furniture is nice and neat in the dungeon.
One thing that would give away like a mimic in the room as a treasure chest or whatever would be that there's no guards anywhere nearby, or there's no other enemies nearby, because the mimics obviously ate them all. All that's left is like a singular treasure chest in a room.
Right, and we're assuming mimics only go after adventurers. Mimics might be chomping down on those goblin warrens, eating a random goblin here or there, or the lone orc that was injured in battle that comes back to the cave system or something, and the mimic might be eating them away, and they're just blaming each other because they're so like chaotic and evil, and wouldn't, when someone goes missing or wants to go after the treasure, the orc chieftain says, don't touch my treasure, and then someone sneaks into the orc chieftain's hidden abode and sees 2 treasure chests, they're not going to question it. And then if an orc or a goblin or something like that goes missing, they're probably not going to question that as either, So I could see a mimic supplementing it. Maybe adventuring humanoids taste better, but it may be to tide itself over. The errant goblin probably enough nutrients for now.
That goes into the whole discussion of we we assume dungeons are created where all the enemies in the dungeon know about all the other enemies in the dungeon. So obviously they wouldn't know that there's mimics in the dungeon. A mimic set up shop around the corner,
Yeah.
unless they put it there.
Yeah, Tesla Ranger asked what creature category is a mimic, and Prue says monstrosity, medium monstrosity. So, see, I think monstrosity is 5th edition's version of something that doesn't fit into any other category, because there's also the aberrant category. So, wow, it doesn't even. Hmm. It doesn't even have a relationship with anything else. It's not like
No.
it's not in a family of, I mean, not naturally in a family of other creatures like it, like oozes or something, which it could be an ooze that evolves maybe. Like there could be a life cycle of an ooze that destroys things, that then becomes a mimic if it lives long enough, that then becomes maybe a doppelganger or something. I know I'm stretching, but I'm just coming up with like new ideas.
I'm assuming that like a mimic, like once it gains enough intelligence, becomes a doppelganger, gains the ability to like take on, because that's what I think. That's why I think mimics can only do inanimate objects, because it doesn't possess the intelligence to replicate the workings of a living creature.
Maybe other doppelgangers could teach mimics that are starting to become more intelligent and pull them into the fold, kind of like once they start gaining some intelligence, a doppelganger may come by and realize it and start to train them a little bit. I can't imagine that they would want to hang around too often, because they may be apex predators, living amongst, intelligent society, civilization. But I could imagine that if it sees, if that chair, I mean, it could be a biological thing where the chair wants to become like a small child or something, and so the adult shifted doppelganger adopts the small child to start to train it on how to live. And as they start murdering people in the small town, and then when the child starts to grow bigger, they have to separate, and it might just be something instinctual rather than, I mean, intelligently they know what's going on, but it could be how they breed and move and such. I don't know. I mean, that's really bizarre. I mean, my mind is going 1,000 miles an hour because I'm thinking of all these different situations where mimics could exist in a society, and as it comes across other shape-changed creatures or what have you, I wonder. I mean, I wonder how other creatures that can shape change react to it, like dragons or demons and devils or something. Demons or devils might ignore it, or keep it as a pet, take it back home, keep them as a pet. Dragons might ignore it too,
because doppelgangers are actually monstrous as well. They're classed as monstrous shapeshifters, like mimics are classed, but cloakers are classed as aberrations. Sorry,
really.
which is strange. They're classed as large aberrations, cloakers.
I wonder if it's just a matter of choice, like the game creators may not have wanted to put 5 or 6 creatures and lump them all together. Maybe they just said, the mimic is just, it's this, it's just an outside element, and we're not going to classify it with other things. Whereas the cloaker is specifically like a cloak, because the cloaker has like special abilities and it's intelligent and everything. So maybe they just wanted to like not associate mimics and doppelgangers with any other creature, which is kind of weird. Like they're a shape changer that's not associated with a group of other shape changers. I could see that just being a choice rather than, maybe they shrugged their shoulders and were like, should we not? And someone said, well, we don't have enough monstrosities, so they just gave it a monstrosity label and left it at that.
Maybe mimics and doppelgangers are a lot more instinctual than cloakers. Cloakers are maybe a lot more tactical and that than mimics, and they're more bestial.
Wow. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe. I mean, you could hide a mimic in an adventuring party for quite a while, especially if they have like a number of like magic items or even mundane items, and they continually use their magical items. So like the backpack mimic might not really want to attack them yet, thinking that the adventuring party may move itself to someplace else quicker and faster, especially if they can like travel, they've got teleportation, they've got flight or something. They could really spread, no pun intended, to spread their wings and go to another area to get better prey. But yeah, you could really do some damage with a mimic. I think mimics probably get away with a lot more than people think they would. A lot of unsolved murders, a lot of unsolved creatures being killed in the wild. Like, for example, in our own world, sometimes one animal starts to overbreed because another animal is not limiting its growth. So a mimic could come into a region and, let's say, starts killing deer, and killing the deer means that the bears or something, or saber-toothed tigers or what have you, start to encroach on civilization because they're normally the deer that they normally eat aren't around because the mimic has been eating them. And then this causes a cascade effect as predators start moving towards civilization because they don't have enough prey. And then civilization starts to want to eliminate the wolves or saber-toothed tigers or something that are attacking them. And it could all be due to a mimic, and everyone keeps running past the same boulder that's out in the woods this whole time. And for years and years, this thing just keeps happening. And the mimic is just like, I just like to taste the deer.
Does the mimic actually have a predator, would you say?
Ooh.
Would the mimic actually have something that goes after them?
Ooh.
Because maybe becoming the treasure chest and whatnot isn't a predatory action. Maybe it's a defense.
So something has been consuming mimics, and the mimic learned to do this. Like, yeah, it could be. But what in the world would want to go after mimics? Unless, I mean, you could do the usual, like, wizards have always been hunting them, and mimics learn how to hide themselves because wizards maybe use them for like polymorph spells or potions or something like that. But there could be some other worldly creatures that have been going after mimics this whole time, and the mimics just learn this as a natural defense mechanism. Like maybe,
I'm trying to think of one.
Yeah, I know, because the only thing coming to mind would be a doppelganger, but doppelgangers have human beings to go after. Let me see. Wow, what other creature would be able to see
would a
them?
doppelganger not destroy a mimic if it was encroaching on its hunting ground?
True.
Because they both go after the same prey, basically.
Right. So there could be a kind of like territorial instinct where doppelgangers, if they see a mimic, they want that mimic to get out of there because they don't want to be caught, and the mimic's just going to compound the situation.
If a mimic starts killing, then suspicion might turn to them. It's the doppelganger, the new guy in town kind of thing.
Jared says you could say that a mimic that eats another mimic doubles in size, and aberrations are quite strange and don't really have an ecology, which I guess would be the same thing with monstrosities. Yeah. So, wow. So maybe a mimic is a side effect of a doppelganger, right? So like a doppelganger, like shedding its skin, or maybe there's some kind of biological residue from a doppelganger, or when it's injured and it creates mimics. And so maybe they understand mimics exist, but this is kind of like a side effect of a doppelganger's existence. Yep.
Maybe doppelgangers see mimics as abominations that shouldn't exist because of that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just going to do one thing. Got to say goodbye to the loved one. Baby. All right. I love you. Yeah, she's getting ready for work. She's half awake like I am. Sorry. Oh, so mimics would be a good guard dog creature for a treasure hoard. That's what Jared says. I think, man, mimics sure are apex predators, because there's a ton of things that hunt human beings. There isn't anything that would hunt that I can think of that would hunt a mimic.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah, unless it destroying and eating a mimic fuels another creature. So, like there's another shape-changing creature that consumes mimics so that it can still, I don't know what you call, like, although you could say mimics could attack other mimics though, right? So that they're rather singular and solitary, and so they can become larger and, oh, hold on. Oh, I gotta move my car.
Oh, please no.
Yeah, I gotta move my car. All right, here I come.
I'll move it.
You sure? Shit. Yeah, my car's parked in the driveway and it's blocking her car, and I just thought, I didn't even think about it. Yeah, she's pissed, so I'll have to make amends.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. If only I could become a mimic and just fade into the background.
I was just reading about mimics, and it doesn't actually specify a size of object that they can become. It just says they can become any object, but their statistics stay the same.
So it could become, I mean, if we're using logic in a fantasy world, I'm assuming that it's always the same weight.
Yeah, statistics stay the same, so it would be heavy. So it would learn not to become anything that should be a different weight, kind of thing.
Jared says, "Got to think of your better half. Parking your car in the driveway. Disadvantage on your next persuasion check." Oh no! I think I've suffered some hit point loss. I'm going to have to get I'm going to have to buy some flowers as a restoration potion, I think. Yeah. Hopefully she's half awake and won't remember, but I pretty much guarantee that that's not the case.
Never the case.
Yeah. So, we've passed the hour mark. I was trying to keep my eye on the time. I hate holding people too long, but yeah, mimics are just one of those strange classic D&D creatures that's like, you start to think about it, and I mean, there's great ways you can use them, but when they fit into the world, it's like you start scratching your head like, wow, what happens with them? Now, I do think that there might be wizards or some kind of cult or something like that, maybe that's going around trying to uncover and capture and use mimics, which would be bizarre in and of itself if you have this strange cult like gathering random chairs and doors and empty chests and things like that in a community, and everyone's like, what? Like they're not worshiping Demogorgon or something. They're actually just going into small communities and taking hammers and knocking on random stones, or like kicking steps and poking doors with 10-foot poles randomly, and it was I mean, breaking into people's homes and stealing their cabinets. Like, oh, it was here yesterday. I know it. And they're the only ones that happen to see the mimic attacks when they happen.
That would be an adventure in itself. The party are called in because people's objects have started to go missing.
Yeah.
People's furniture and stuff started to go missing. So, and then they eventually find that it's a wizard collecting these items because he suspects they're mimics.
Yep. So, let's call it a day. RP. Let me sign out, then I'll let you promote anything you're doing. So, of course, those who don't know, I'm DBJ. I actually changed the channel slightly, calling it RPG with DBJ. I don't know if that'll work. I don't know. I don't know anything about YouTube and whatnot. Anyway, someone suggested it to me, so I decided to change the name slightly. I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing, so you'll find that information below. There's also a Discord channel. If you join the Discord, you can send me questions. Actually, if you hit hashtag questions for DBJ, they can become new topics for later on. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can join the Discord. And I think it's just a better way to organize people's like the community instead of using the chat below. I'm not the chat, the comment section. And every D6th and D20th, we have a new release. We just released The Sunken Village is our second release. The first one was released on the D6th and the second one on the D20th. So just try to keep that in. Remember, if you roll a 20, that's a critical hit. So anyway, and so yeah, and we released Plains and Grasslands, which is the 8th installment in our Cinematic Environs series here. So anyway, that's it. RP, please take us out.
Yeah, I've been RP Gamer, and subscribe and like my channel because I need the subscriptions.
There you go.
and I'm not doing anything as fancy as DBJ, but stay tuned because I'm running more games soon and more videos coming up every day. So please subscribe.
Yeah, don't forget to what is it? Thumb, sub, bell, and share.
Yeah, I always forget saying that.
Yeah, but
I feel a bit weird, kind of trying to promote my own stuff.
I feel like I'm both pimp and prostitute, sir. Pimp and prostitute. It's like, please, there's a party in my mouth and everyone's invited. Please come. I feel just like that. So yeah, it's a bizarre thing, dude. It's really bizarre to have to, have to promote yourself, because I am not a salesperson at all, like marketing director or something. I guess that's why you hire those people, because they're used to pandering, and I think
a
it
shame
just
we can't
sucks.
afford them.
Yeah. So anyway, RP, of course you have an open invitation. Come on, and you say, hey, dude, I got this really great idea. You're always invited. There's others out there probably want to maybe talk about what they're doing or promote themselves. So if you're willing to get up just slightly before 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, whatever your time zone equivalent would be to that, just send me a message some kind of way and ask me if you want to join me. So that's possible too. Each day is a different subject, so you might have to hold off a little bit, because like Fridays are my science fiction, like eclipse phase stuff. So yeah, you might have to hold on just a little bit for a specific day, but just to keep it consistent, but whatever. All right, guys, thank you very much. We will be signing off now, and have a good one.